really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here again today. I'm glad to be talking once again about a topic that has come up in my life, something that I'm working on and thinking about right now, which is the nature of all of these episodes I do for this podcast. And I'm assuming if you listen, it's because maybe something strikes a chord with you. Maybe it's something that you resonate with that you also happen to be working on. So I share my thoughts with you. I share things I'm learning and sometimes new practices that I'm working on in order to help myself grow in a certain way. So in this podcast, I tend to be pretty vulnerable and talk about areas where I need to do some work on myself. So with that being said, today I want to talk about what is toxic positivity. And toxic positivity is a term that I've been seeing fairly often in social media these days about lots of things, particularly in the grief world. And what I understand about it is that sometimes our society treats people who are grieving with toxic positivity and encourages them to let go of any negative feelings, let go of their pain and sadness, and instead focus on being positive. That's how I've always thought of toxic positivity. But this year, right before Thanksgiving here in the US, and I'm recording this right after Thanksgiving, I saw a meme on social media that simply mentioned that gratitude practices are a form of toxic positivity. And this, of course, was associated with Thanksgiving, since the idea of being thankful is part of the message and the meaning of this holiday. And it took me a little bit by surprise because I haven't seen gratitude associated with toxic positivity before. And it made me think maybe I don't understand enough about what toxic positivity really is. So I started doing a little research and reading about it. And here's one of the definitions that I found: that toxic positivity is believing that negative thoughts about anything should be avoided, especially anger and sadness. It is positivity invoked as a coping mechanism for loss or hardship. And it's toxic because it dismisses true expression of the full emotional spectrum. And I get that. I understand that totally. And I have seen that for a long time as a problem in the positive psychology movement, and also in some new age movements like the law of attraction and The Secret. An understanding that seemed to be presented there, that if you express any sort of negative emotion, you will attract that negativity to yourself. So you have to constantly put yourself into a place of thinking positive thoughts, expressing positive emotions only, so that you only attract positive or good things into your life. And frankly, that way of thinking seemed ridiculous to me from the beginning. Like, already in my own life, I knew for sure that's not true and that's not even healthy or right. So that type of thinking definitely seems like toxic positivity to me, to focus only on positive things out of fear that you might attract something negative into your life. That's not how life works. It's not how the world really is. And so I've had a strong distaste for that way of thinking for a long time. But once again, we go back to this idea: can gratitude itself be a form of toxic positivity? So I kept reading that, the issue with toxic positivity is that it's used to cover up or deny the human experience, to deny what it's like to be human and what life is really like, and to pretend like we have a different life than we actually have, and causes us to stuff or dismiss our emotions. And those repressed emotions can be very harmful to us emotionally, causing anxiety, depression, stress response, physical illnesses. But also, it tends to lead to feeling guilty for what we are feeling. And so when we repress natural, normal emotions, whether they fall on the negative or positive end of the spectrum, because we believe that it's wrong to feel what we call negative emotions, then the outcome of that is that we end up feeling guilty about ourselves, as if I'm doing the wrong thing, I'm not handling this correctly. We judge ourselves, and we can also feel ashamed or embarrassed by our own negativity and by our own emotions that we are actually expressing. And so this is like a vicious cycle of guilt and shame and self-judgment that it's very hard to get out of. And so it's really interesting that in the search for positive psychology and positive emotion, we actually end up triggering this negative cycle of self-judgment, feeling like a failure, feeling guilty. I'm feeling guilty because I have negative emotions. So this all makes sense to me, and I totally get in the grief world why this sort of positivity is very harmful to people, because we give them messages that they should not be feeling grief, they should not feel sad, they should look for the silver lining, look for the good news, look for something great and happy and wonderful within their pain and their grief. And we tend to minimize what other people are experiencing instead of validating it and helping them hold it, and also shame them for what they're experiencing. So we actually end up triggering for them this negative cycle of self-judgment, guilt, shame that goes on. And so even those negative emotions then become another trigger for more negative emotions, because they start to feel guilty that they're feeling guilty. And this is a terrible vicious cycle that it's very hard to get out of. All of this makes total sense to me, and why when someone's grieving, we have to be careful about the words we say to them. And saying positive words may seem like an attempt to cheer someone up, but they may actually negate what the person is feeling. And so I read some suggestions that you can say when someone's having a hard time that are more supportive and that can actually help that person feel okay about whatever emotions they're feeling. These are things we can also say to ourselves when we ourselves are having a rough time and having some difficult emotions arise. So here are some of these ideas, like, what are you feeling? I'm listening. Instead of deciding what someone else must be feeling, to ask them what they're feeling and be willing to listen to those feelings. And same with ourselves, ask ourselves, what is it that I'm feeling right now? Another statement was, I see that you're stressed. Is there anything that I can do? This is hard. I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you during the good times as well as the bad times. You're not alone. Or I'm sorry that you're going through this right now. All of those statements acknowledge the difficulty for the other person. Don't judge the other person for it, and don't tell the other person how they should be feeling about whatever they're going through. So I really liked all of those suggestions. But as I said, those are really good things to say to ourselves when we're going through a hard time, as a way of being our own best friend, in a way, to actually talk to ourselves and remind ourselves, like, I'm not alone. This is hard, but I'm here for myself. I can get myself through this. I'm sorry I'm going through it, but I'm listening and I'm here and I'm showing up for myself to take care of myself during this difficult time. So again, though, none of these statements really answered my question is, can a gratitude practice be part of toxic positivity? And is encouraging someone to find something to be grateful for, is that toxic? Can it be toxic in a way? Are we asking someone then to cover up their feelings? So I kept reading, and I read an interesting article by a woman who said she's a happiness researcher, but that during COVID, she felt absolutely crushed and could not find happiness anywhere in spite of having lots of practices in her life to bring about more happiness. They didn't work for her. They didn't help her. And she writes about the fact that some of our skills, our coping skills, and meditation and mindfulness and those things may not work when we're actually in the midst of a dark time, when we're actually going through a crisis. We're feeling despair and grief and pain and loneliness and isolation. Those tools that we have learned in the past may not work for us. And I would say gratitude may fall into that same category. When we're in the deepest, darkest place, how do we even generate gratitude? How do we even find gratitude when we're in that space? How do we even find happiness or joy within that dark space? And this researcher said that in her experience, we need authentic connections in order to heal, whether it is with other people, some special person, or even with ourselves. It takes love for us to heal when we're in a very dark time. And that love, which is not toxic, love is the one thing that can be soothing and healing in a dark time that doesn't require us to be anything other than what we are, to feel anything differently than what we feel. Love simply embraces and accepts whatever is present, whatever arises, whatever we happen to feel. And I really like that. Love is genuinely what we need in that moment. Again, we may not be able to generate love for ourselves. We may not be able to find it within ourselves. If we are able to find a connection anywhere with another person, a group of people, with nature even, going out in the garden, going into a forest, being with a beloved pet, those things may help us experience enough love that it can bring a little bit of light into our darkness. So I really liked that suggestion. And she also mentioned, she asked a psychologist about how to handle these places of darkness, who said, ask yourself the question, what do I need right now to be here for my life? What is it that I need? And then simply be still and listen. And you may not get an answer, but you may find that from within yourself, there's a little voice, or there's a sense that right now I need to take a hot bath. Right now, I need to go for a walk. Right now, I need to talk to someone on the phone. You may have a sense of what it is that you need right now in the moment. It was also suggested in the article to think about forgiving yourself and having self-compassion, which helps us get beyond that tendency to feel guilty that we have negative feelings, to feel like, oh, I'm failing because I'm in such a dark place. But to have a very generous sense of self-forgiveness, like whatever I feel, it's okay. I forgive myself. I allow myself to feel whatever I feel. I allow it to be here. And have compassion for our hurting selves, for this painful part of ourselves within, and not judge it, just simply hold it with love and compassion. Another reminder is to think there are things that I cannot fix. And that is life. That is normal. That's just how life is. And that gets us out of some of the toxic positive thinking that we should be able to fix anything. We should be able to make anything better. We should be able to make any situation happier or more joyful. To recognize that life is filled with things that we simply can't change, and we can't fix it and make it better. All we can do is be with it and hold it. And then another reminder was that you don't need to be anything when you are in this state of despair and grief and darkness. You don't need to be anything other than what you are. You don't need to be happy. You don't need to be compassionate. You don't need to be mindful. You don't need to be grateful. You don't need to feel anything other than what you feel. Just be where you are with those feelings. And I love that. I love that reminder. That's where I think telling someone, do a gratitude practice, that will really help you. And I'm guilty of that. I recommend gratitude practices all the time. But telling someone in the midst of their deepest darkness and most broken place, just do a gratitude practice. That'll help you. You'll feel more grateful, and that will bring more joy to you, and you'll feel happier and have more love and light. But to tell someone, you don't need to be or feel anything right now. Just be where you are. Just feel whatever you feel. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. Just be wherever you are. That's fine. There are things you can't fix. Allow that to be there. Forgive yourself. Don't judge yourself. Love yourself. Love who you are in this moment right now, just as you are. And then the last step was to remember all I have to do is keep going if I can. If I can put one foot in front of the other, or even if I can only move 1 foot an inch at a time, if I can move a tiny bit, that's all I need to do. And even honestly, if I can't move at all, that's fine too. If for right now I just need to be and stay right where I am, and not keep moving forward, that's also fine as well. So reading this article and some of the references in the article helped me understand how recommending a gratitude practice to someone in the very midst of their despair, as I was saying, in the deepest, darkest hour of their lives, could be insensitive in a way, could be completely missing the point and unhelpful, and maybe even toxic to recommend to that person. You should find something to be grateful for right now. Even though I'm such a strong believer in gratitude as an overall and daily practice and how much it helps us in general, I can see that it isn't always helpful in those deep, dark moments. And to recommend it to another person may not be very helpful. But I'm not saying that we should throw gratitude out at all, not whatsoever, because I still believe in the power of gratitude, but I want to talk to about how we might more skillfully be able to use gratitude in our own lives and to recommend it to other people. And so, if I look within myself when I'm going through a really hard time, I think number one, the very first step is acknowledging the pain. And this alone prevents toxic positivity. The moment that you say, there's a lot of pain here and I'm willing to feel it, I'm allowing it to come to the surface, suddenly you've eliminated toxic positivity. You're not in that place where you're denying or repressing feelings. You're allowing the feelings to be there. So feel all of the feelings, sit with them, allow them to come to the surface. Let them just be present and feel them no matter how painful it is, no matter how hard it is. It's actually more hurtful to you to repress the painful emotions than it is to just experience them and just allow them to be there and sit with them. And maybe you don't even understand what they are. Maybe you don't know for sure what it is you're feeling. It just feels dark. It feels dark and deep, and you may not even have words for it, but that's okay too. Let the darkness be there. Let yourself be in that deep place right now, and let as much of it that wants to come to the surface, let it come. Let it come and be present to the surface. You don't have to dredge up negative feelings. You don't have to try to find more or make it worse or amplify it. Simply be. While you're not repressing it, you're also not trying to forcefully pull those feelings out of yourself. You're allowing them to arise naturally, to come to the surface at the right time. And I think the very next step of this is to be able to hold those feelings, whatever they are, fear, anger, sadness, whatever they are, to be able to hold them in a safe container, I think of it. And this is like not an actual container, but to hold it safely within your awareness. Say your awareness is this vast container, and all of those feelings can exist there within that container, and you can hold them safely because you've got them. You're carrying them, you're holding them, you're allowing them to be present, but you're not allowing them to spill out and rage out and rush over other people. You're allowing them to be present and to fill up this safe container that you've created. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the container, but I like this visual image of a container, a vast, huge bowl or a basin or even a bucket, but it's vast and it's huge and it can hold anything that you need to put into it. Anything that arises will fit into this container of your awareness. So you allow the feelings to come, you acknowledge them, you don't repress them, you allow them to be in your container. And at the same time, while you're making room for all of the pain to arise that is within you, become aware of any little glimmers of positive feelings that might also be arising. They may not be there. There may not be anything positive whatsoever in this soup that's coming up from you, that's coming up to be held in your container. It may not be anything positive whatsoever. But it's possible that there could be the tiniest bit of light. There could be the tiniest bit of joy. And this takes me all the way back to those early years after my dad died by suicide, when I was like deeply, deeply grieving, just completely devastated and really floundering in that deep, dark place. And I remember at that time, if any joy would arise within me, I actually felt that I needed to snuff it out. I needed to repress the joy. I needed to repress any positive feelings because in my mind, that was wrong. I'm grieving. I'm sad because my dad died. There cannot possibly be joy here. And I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't allow any positive feeling to arise within me at that time. That felt wrong to me. And so how interesting, on the other end of the spectrum, we can also repress our positive emotions and feel guilt and shame because a positive emotion is arising within us. And so it's so interesting how all of these experiences, there's a balance going on here. There's a spectrum and there's a balance in how we feel and how we look at ourselves and how we judge ourselves. The point is to allow whatever feelings are there to be there. And so at that time, I would call it my mistake, but I don't really see it as a mistake. It's simply where I was emotionally at the time, what I was able to handle. I, for a long time, wouldn't allow joy to be there. It felt to me like that would deny my grief. I needed to only feel sadness and only feel pain in order to validate it and to legitimize my feelings after my dad died. But over the years, over time, I gradually began to allow a space for joy to be there. It took a long time, trust me, like years, before I was able to do that, before I was able to find enough room for joy to fit, and before I got over my own guilt and shame in my head, guilt for feeling joy. So I had to allow myself to finally come to a place where any feelings that were present could arise, negative, positive, whatever they were. And I don't even like those labels, negative and positive anyway. I feel like our feelings are just our feelings. They're just real and true. And I finally did reach a point where it was okay for me. I could allow myself to experience joy. I could make room for joy in that big container where I was holding all of this grief and pain, all the stigma, all the shame, all the judgment, all the guilt was holding on to so much in that vast container. And finally, I found room for a tiny little bit of joy to enter. And that was actually one of the times when things began to shift for me a little bit. And I began to experience some growth, some post-traumatic growth, I would say. I began to find myself increasing in my capacity to just fully live, to have the full spectrum of all emotions, including happiness and joy. So if we are able to maintain this container of our awareness, where we're allowing all of our feelings to come up, all of the difficult, painful feelings, any positive feelings, any little glimmers of light that want to be there. If there aren't any glimmers of light, there's no shame, there's no judgment. It's fine. Just be with whatever is there. Allow it to arise. But if there is a positive feeling, also allow that to rise. Allow space to be there in room for anything to rise to the surface that wants to be there. And it's possible that at some time during this process, as we're maintaining this container, this safe container of all these emotions, that gratitude may arise during this process. It may be that there is awareness of thankfulness, of simply being grateful for certain things that happen. Now, should we be grateful for the tragedy, the crisis, the trauma, the death, the loss? Not necessarily, though, I'm at a place in my grief experience now where I can experience gratitude that I have had this opportunity in my life to experience extremely deep pain and trauma, and to go on this journey with that pain, and to learn how I could possibly grow through it, and to experience post-traumatic growth over years and years of time. And I can now be grateful for the journey, and grateful that I've had this opportunity in my life for a journey like this. Grateful that my father took his own life. No, that doesn't describe what it is. This is grateful that life presented me with a situation that made it possible for me to break apart, to really shatter myself, and slowly, gradually over the years to put things back together in my life in a healthier, more meaningful, more compassionate way than ever before. So yes, gratitude may not be present at all anywhere amongst the feelings that are arising in the midst of the darkness, but perhaps later down the road, perhaps gratitude is just something that comes much later on the journey when we look back in retrospect at what has happened. And so maybe gratitude really isn't a helpful practice when we're in the darkness. And maybe to suggest it to people isn't the right thing. Maybe it is toxic to people if I suggest that to them. And I can recognize that now. I see how I need to have much more nuance here about recommending tools for people to use when they're in the darkness. And it occurs to me that gratitude, a practice of gratitude, actually helps us when we're not in the darkness and when we're not in the midst of some sort of tragedy or crisis that we're just trying to survive. We can utilize a gratitude practice when we're having better days. And the gratitude practice, I believe, helps us grow our container, helps us create a stronger, bigger container that can carry more emotion when we do go through the dark times. So I think the appropriate use of a gratitude practice is when we're feeling more whole, when we've maybe recovered from some of the pain we were experiencing before, when we have more light, when we're a little more out of the dark place, and we have the bandwidth to experience and express gratitude when it comes to us naturally. That's the perfect time to utilize a gratitude practice to grow the container and get stronger and more resilience. And there's been lots of research done on gratitude practices, which is even what inspired me to want to start sharing it and talking to people about being grateful. But we know that gratitude definitely strengthens our connections with other people, which is one of the things that helps us when we're in the deepest, darkest place. We know gratitude helps us cope with stress and adversity. It increases our resilience. So gratitude allows us to face our pain even better than we ever could have before. And so practicing gratitude when we rise up a little bit out of that dark space can help us and prepare us for the next time we experience a tragedy. So a gratitude practice could be toxic if we're doing it as a way to avoid the painful feelings inside of us. Recommending it to someone could be toxic if it's not really what they need, and if what we're actually asking them to do is say something positive right now instead of talking about what you really feel. But I'm still a big believer that when we're not in the depths of darkness, gratitude is a wonderful practice and can help us grow. As I said, stretch our boundaries, strengthen our connections, make us so much more resilient and so much better prepared for whatever comes next. And we know for sure something else will come next, because that's how life is. Life is full of things that we can't fix. There will be a next time. There will be something else that challenges us and pushes us down into the darkness, something else that we will find ourselves struggling with. So these are my thoughts on toxic positivity, my new understanding of how we can appropriately perhaps use tools like gratitude, and just how sensitive we need to be to where a person is when they're going through a challenging time, and having a feel for the recommendations I make, and aligning them with what's happening for that particular person at that particular time. So I hope this has been helpful for you in this post-Thanksgiving week as we look ahead to the rest of the holiday season, to think about toxic positivity and making sure that we make space for all of the emotion, all the feelings, whatever happens to be there. And may you have a strong and vast container to hold whatever experiences life brings to you. And so until the next time we're together, remember that we're here for love. Love is the most important thing that we can focus on. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your precious existence. Bye-bye.